$1 million now?
Yes, it is, and I believe your legal staff has informed you that they consider our liability coverage inadequate in so much that it does not protect third-party individuals. In other words, if we somehow strike somebody while we're in the air or, landing, we haven't had any interactions with third-party individuals, never any complaints. But yes, we are quite available to increase our coverage.
Thank you very much. There may be questions later. Now we'll go to the staff comments.
Madam Mayor, Bob Roebuck will make the
Oh, I'm
staff
sorry. I
presentation.
think there was someone else to speak. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and honorable council persons. My name is Ken de Russy, and I've lived in Santa Barbara since 1974. I really first should thank you so much for your time you devoted to this issue. I must say the city staff and the council people I have had contact with have treated us with great dignity. I fought in a war and very nearly died several times. I have had contact, in my mind, I was there fighting for the freedom of choice, the freedom of spirit that I believe we have all found in flight. I've had the extraordinary privilege of spending the last 24 years sharing that freedom of spirit with many others by teaching the sport of hang gliding and paragliding. We have at some time in our lives experienced that, we have all at some times in our lives experienced that freedom of spirit. I don't have to ask you to know that sometime when you were somewhere between 4 and 10 years old, you spread your not so imaginary wings and flew around your yard or your house, flapping or jumping with that unbounded belief that children have that you really were flying. When Superman the movie came out, they knew they would capture everyone's attention with that probably announcer, James Earl Jones announcer's voice, the marketing line that said, "You will believe a man can fly." It's a powerful thought that resonates with all people. In every mythology and religion, flight is held as the highest achievement possible. Indeed, angels are given wings as a reward for doing good deeds on earth. Everyone admires flight. In ancient times, all travel and movement was an effort. You can imagine primitive man of maybe 500,000 years ago struggling through brambles and poison oak to cross a valley and climb up a slope to throw himself exhausted by a fire after a day of foraging. At that point, imagine a bird flying easily by. I'm sure even in his primitive thought process, he must have thought to himself, well, that looks a lot easier. Humankind has always wanted to fly. Local hang gliding began in the early 70s with, among others, 4 children ages 12 to 14. The sport was invented locally by children. Can you imagine the courage of the mothers? Santa Barbara has a rich aviation history. Did you know that Lockheed started here? They were launching their airplanes from the beach right near the wharf. Santa Barbara is a mecca for personal flight. We are blessed with a climate that exists only on 2% of the Earth's landmass. Almost all mountains in the Western Hemisphere run north to south. Here in Santa Barbara, we have mountains that run east to west. This gives us a south-facing coastline and a south-facing orientation that encourages year-round flying. Flying opportunities here are a resource, a treasure available in few other places in the world. Choices we make now direct our future. Imagine if Yosemite had been dammed to make a reservoir. It's easy now to appreciate the foresight of preserving it. I'm a dreamer. I believe in the impossible. I've done the impossible. I've walked on 1,300-degree flaming coals. And no, I didn't burn my feet, but every time I'm next to a campfire, I look at it and think, no, I still don't want to walk on fire. But what it's left me with is a belief in the impossible. I know, you can't walk on fire. You understand that intuitively. And yet I did it. So I'm left with a feeling that all things are possible. Every time I think to myself, no, that's not possible, this is an impossible dream, I remember walking on the coals. I have a vision I would like to share with you. It's a vision of a world in which flight is widespread. We've only had about 100 years of aviation. Personal flight is still not yet here, not in a widespread manner. If we have the vision to protect the precious and unique resources that we have left, we might someday fondly remember the daring visionaries that so wisely ensured our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll go to staff comments.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I have a presentation for you on the subject, and as soon as we take off the cover off the lens here and hit the lights, could you get the lights, Marcelo? We'll get underway here. Just for some background information, the city of Santa Barbara. Well, first of all, let me get you oriented on this map here. North is on the upper part of the screen here. This is Gibraltar Reservoir, and the dam. To the bottom of the screen here is Mission Canyon, this area, Sheffield Reservoir here, and East Camino Cielo, which is basically on the crest of the mountain. This goes right through this area here. So everything you see in here in yellow is the property of the city water fund. This land was acquired by the city of Santa Barbara when it purchased the Santa Barbara Water Company in 1910. And at that time, the water company was actually constructing Mission Tunnel. It proved to be a little too expensive. They're in the process of going bankrupt. So the city of Santa Barbara purchased and took over the tunnel construction, and then along with that got all this land. Now, associated with this land, there's certain interests that the city has and certain interests that the Forest Service has. The area that's shown in clear here belongs to the Forest Service. The city city staff is interested in acquiring some additional land here where the dam caretaker's house is. The Forest Service actually owns land under the reservoir. Also, they own land under a decanting basin here that we're responsible to maintain. They own the Gibraltar Road that we need to access the dam. So we have certain interests as far as obtaining some U.S. Forest Service land. And the Forest Service has interests in city lands. They're interested in some environmentally sensitive areas. One is the Mono Basin up here, some endangered species at that location, and also Blue Canyon, which is just off the screen here. We own about 700 acres in that area that they're interested in. Also, it's a lower priority, but they have expressed interest in the past in recreational activities which are occurring in this area and here. The next overhead will be a larger scale, the center of that screen. And to get you oriented, Gibraltar Road meanders through the map here. And this is East Camino Cielo right here. The what we call the area of trespass, where all this work has occurred, is at this point right here, and it's in this on this parcel that's owned by the city water fund. Trying to get an idea of exactly what occurred at this location. It's hard to see the location from this map, but it is right here. It's that's a spot where the grass has been planted and the improvements have occurred. And here's the telephoto view, and this is from the back steps of City Hall, and it becomes a little more evident. You can see the improvements right in this area right here. That green spot represents the grassed area. And at this time, that area is really disappearing because there hasn't been watering for several months now, and the area is turning brown. Okay, here's some pictures of the site itself. Gibraltar Road here is to your left, and immediately in front of you is the concrete jump-off ramp for the hang gliders. It's about a 5-foot by 10-foot concrete ramp. Here's a closer view of it, starting to see Rattlesnake Canyon.
May I ask a question on that
Yes,
one?
Mr. Beavers.
Who put that ramp in?
Well, Tom Truax has indicated that.
Now.
I'm
Well-
happy to answer that question. That was not Mr.
If you want to speak, you'll have to come to the microphone because this is taped. Thank you.
That ramp was not of the efforts of Mr. Truax. That ramp was poured about 6 months ago by a few members of the association without the permission of the association, and it was done on the behalf of safety. Although we have been flying off of that location for 20 some odd years without that ramp, it's a nice feature, but it's certainly not necessary. Some of our older pilots appreciate the fact that the ramp is there, and the primary reason why it was installed was to control erosion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I was going to say that Tom Truax has taken responsibility along with some of the other people that work with him for the majority of improvements there. However, I wasn't able to identify exactly who poured that concrete ramp, so I appreciate that clarification. Okay, this is part of a water system for irrigation of landscaping on the site. It's bringing up water from Rattlesnake Canyon, going underneath Gibraltar Road. And here's some water faucets over here. This was used initially when water was trucked up with a container in the back of a truck, and the water was unloaded into these faucets here alongside Gibraltar Road. These are some steps leading down from Gibraltar Road, and is Arnold Avila, who came to me and informed me about what had occurred on the land. This is a landing on the steps looking to the east, and on this view you can see there is quite a retaining wall here made out of railroad ties, and of course a table in that area there, and you can see a bench here, and then the grass area to your right. And farther down the landing you can see down Rattlesnake Canyon, and again the table and bench, and the grass is coming into view now.
Mr. Roebuck, is the grass that we see, is that what was planted?
That was planted.
So that's not native grass?
That's not native grass, no, that's kikuyu grass. It's very hardy grass. These poles right here are used by the paragliders so they can get air into their sails before they run down the slope and then take off into Rattlesnake Canyon. This is looking back up toward the retaining wall. You can see 6 55-gallon drums here that hold water for the irrigation system, and at this point right here we're putting up some stop notices. This is a little farther down the slope. In the very front of the slide here you can see some hose bibs, and in fact this is a hose right here. When we were up there on February 27th they were actually doing some irrigation at that time. The grass is very lush. Some more views of the area. This is a little farther down the slope looking toward Rattlesnake Canyon. And this is where you really have to apparently get airborne, because at this point the slope really has a sharp break, and the slope is retained apparently using some wood in this area, and also there's some more railroad ties down here. Also in this area right here it looks like some brush was placed, and there's some other areas around here where I could observe some brush that was on the slope. This is looking back up toward the grassed area, and there's a bench over here, bench and table here. There's actually a concrete structure which I'll talk about in a minute, and then another table over here. This is one of the benches was dedicated to someone who had passed away. It's a picnic table. It's a concrete block structure. This is a 9-foot by 12-foot concrete slab with concrete walls going up, and then on the back wall there was a block wall that was being constructed. The stop notice in the foreground you can see there, and this is actually some color coat was completed after we did post a stop work notice. It's a trail cut through the chaparral. There's a stop work notice. I know you can't read it, but basically it says this is city property. The improvements have been constructed without authorization, and all work must stop immediately, and the improvements must be removed by April 1st. When we were posting these, we ran into Tom Truax, and he indicated that he and some other members were responsible for doing the work up there, and so at that point I sent Tom a letter basically stating the same thing as in the stop work notice, which was to stop work and to remove the improvements by April 1st. And he appealed to the Public Works Director and then ultimately asked for a opportunity to speak, which is why we're here tonight, concerning this stop work notice and the order to remove the improvements. Based upon City Attorney's direction and concern about extensive liability regarding this area, the staff went ahead and had a 300-foot long, 6-foot chain link fence constructed to minimize liability under this situation before it came to council. Here's some more pictures of the chain link fence, and it's quite a structure, 300 feet long, 6 feet high. And of course, when we put up this fence, then the hang gliders and paragliders were no longer able to conduct their activity. Here's a fence that was cut about a week after it was installed. Maintaining a fence at this location, this remote location, is exceedingly difficult, if not impossible. We've had other signs in this area, and we just have not been able to maintain them. And this is a sign that's on the fence. Many signs said no trespassing, no hang gliding, no paragliding. What are the issues we're looking at here? Well, first, unauthorized trespass. The second issue, unpermitted improvements. Third, there's obviously many environmental issues here. Fourth, liability, and this is a big one because under state law, the owner of property has some protection from liability when a ultra-hazardous recreational activity is conducted on that property, and that includes hang gliding and paragliding. When that property becomes improved, then the protection from liability is significantly compromised. And this is a significant issue, obviously, because there have been quite a few improvements on this property. And of course, there are a lot of recreational activities going on in this area, not only the hang gliding and paragliding, but there's also hikers and bikers, and there's mountain climbing going on nearby, and some off-road vehicle activity all on city land. So there's a lot of recreation going on in this area. And neighbors complain about it being an attractive nuisance and parties going on in the evening, so that's something that to consider. What are some of the solutions? Well, we'll look at here the status quo, permit the improvements, transfer, sale, and enforcement. With regard to status quo would mean to leave the fence up, and I don't think that'd satisfy anyone really, because then the hang gliders and paragliders couldn't use the property and people couldn't use the park. And with regard to taking down the fence, that's a major issue from the city standpoint, because then we're subject to some excessive liability concerns. So this is considered unacceptable from the city standpoint. This is non-conforming within the county zoning for this area. This area is actually zoned 40-acre residential. It's also non-conforming with the county's general plan. And as I said, to maintain the status quo is unacceptable from a fence maintenance standpoint and from a liability standpoint. Permit the improvements. This would what it would take to permit the existing improvements. And you're looking at a significant effort here. Looking at an environmental review, looking at design plans, which include site plan, architectural plans, structures, landscaping. You're looking at biological resources analysis, geotechnical and soils analysis, which would include site stability, erosion, drainage, looking at the visual impacts, and you're looking at other analysis, which may include cultural, traffic, and air quality. Significant effort. And on top of all that, you'd have to modify the county zoning, and you'd have to modify the county's general plan for a park-like atmosphere there. Who might be interested in proceeding with something like this? Well, it's been suggested a nonprofit organization, maybe a private party, perhaps a land trust of Santa Barbara, really considering, really the city can't transfer land until these unauthorized and unpermitted improvements are addressed. And as I mentioned on the previous overhead, that would be a significant undertaking by anyone, probably exhaust their resources. The Land Trust of Santa Barbara, in talking to their personnel, they feel that U.S. Forest Service is a logical recipient of this recreational area, and that concurs with city staff's recommendation. The Forest Service is not unused to having hang gliding and paragliding in their parks. They have it permitted in other locations, and they're also used to handling recreational area and obviously the park area in the Los Padres National Forest. So they're geared up to handle these recreational uses.
May I ask a question
Yes,
on that?
Mrs. Beaver.
If this were transferred to the U.S. Forest Service, could it be transferred to the Forest Service as is, and then let them worry about that long list of things?
I will get to that in just a moment.
Oh, you will?
I have
Okay,
actually a
thank
list
you.
on it, and the Forest Service staff and the city staff reached consensus on what needed to be done before the Forest Service would take it.
All right.
So I'll
thank
get to that in just one moment.
Proceed, Mr. Roebuck.
In fact, this is it right here. Okay. All right, this is the option that we're looking at is called enforcement. And as I indicated, the district ranger, Gloria Silva, with the U.S. Forest Service, and I went up there and we took a look at this a week ago. And we were in consensus that before this land would be transferred to the Forest Service, the improvements had to be removed. In fact, the Forest Service concerns turned out to be identical to the city's, in that they could not see accepting this land with these type of improvements on it. So what would remain? Only those items that are needed to, only those items that would, their removal would result in a more of an environmental impact, and that would be primarily erosion impact. So the wood block steps would remain, the railroad tie retaining walls would remain, the grass would remain, but there would be no watering the grass, and already it's going into a dormant stage. It's turning brown. There was some discussion about removing the grass, and that's quite a project. This is kikuyu grass. It's a very hardy grass. You can't really rip it out because the roots stay in the ground and they come back when the rains come. If you try herbicide on it, it takes 2 or 3 applications, and when you're finished, it's unlikely that some of the native vegetation have the opportunity to take over the area for a period of time until the effects of the herbicide dissipates. So what we're looking at is leaving the grass as is with no watering, and observing it for a period of time to see if further action is needed. The chaparral adjacent to the grass is very thick, very dense, and it does not appear that this time the grass is going into that chaparral area. But this is something we'd have to monitor in the future. Okay, what will be removed? Picnic tables, park benches, trash cans, parasailing sail supports, irrigation system, and I know has mentioned something about John Bridgewater said perhaps the irrigation system could remain. His supervisor, Gloria Silva, the district ranger, on seeing the site, said that the irrigation system definitely had to be removed prior to them taking it. So the irrigation system would be removed, the concrete structure in its entirety would be removed, the landscaping, everything except that is what is needed to control erosion would be removed, and the hang glider launch pad should be also removed. Just concerning waterfront property long-term issues in general, because we are such a big landowner in this Los Padres National Forest, our land will be subject to trespass. It will be subject to environmental damage, a lot of recreational activities. This puts an administrative burden on staff, and it also puts a certain amount of liability on the city. So what are we looking at from long-term solution? The Forest Service indicated that if the city was to donate land to the Forest Service, that they could accept it rather quickly. However, if we worked out exchange with them, this would take a significant amount of time because they would have to go through an assessment program. The assessment program would not only look at the economic value of the city property and the Forest Service property, but also look at the environmental value and some other values of the Forest Service and city land. So that would take some time. So that's one of the reasons why the donation is seen as a quicker solution to moving some of this recreational property onto the Forest Service for their administration. The land that we're looking at is about 700 acres. It's this area. I guess it's like a pink or beigeish color right here. What the Forest Service indicated to me was that they were not interested in just having this one parcel, that they were looking at having a recreational corridor, which would include this area here. And what you're looking at in this area, there's off-road vehicles. They're looking at controlling that. A lot of denuding of the slopes caused by motorcycles and other off-road vehicles. There's hiking, biking on Tunnel Trail here. There's some equestrian use. And of course there's paragliding and hang gliding in this area. And there's also some mountain climbing here. So there's a lot of recreational activity going on in here. And what the city would do in transferring this land to the Forest Service, we would retain certain rights with regard to our water facilities and also watershed management. And this was found to be acceptable to the Forest Service. And as I mentioned before, the Forest Service is really geared up more to handle recreational uses in this land, which is in actually, Los Padres National Forest, and it is completely outside of the city boundaries. And then also, as part of our recommendation, is to take a look at the other items of interest between the Forest Service and the city of Santa Barbara with regard to the property that each agency owns. Recommendations: number 1, continue enforcement action, remove improvements. When the improvements are removed, then the fence can come down. And when the fence comes down, then when the fence comes down and the improvements are removed, the city's liability is considered to be manageable. And at that point, the hang gliders and paragliders can resume their activity. The second recommendation is donate recreation corridor parcel to the U.S. Forest Service. And there was a mention about a nonprofit group being able to work with the city or the Forest Service. I know the Forest Service would welcome a nonprofit group working on not only this area but other areas for recreational uses. And they are going to be starting a recreational element review of the Los Padres National Forest within the next year, so the timing on this is very good. And lastly, negotiate the exchange of city and U.S. Forest Service property.
Okay.
That concludes my presentation. I'd be
Mr.
happy to
Roebuck, I have
answer
a question,
questions.
either of you or Mr. Wilson or someone. As I understand this then, the instant that the improvements are removed, we would remove the fence. I assume then we would post it that if you're hang gliding, you're doing so at your own risk or something. I mean, or how do we avoid the continued liability problem? I mean, I'm thinking that the people who are used to hang gliding want to do it, and paragliding, excuse me, want to do it as soon as possible. So from the city standpoint, as soon as those improvements are out of there, and we take the fence down and we put signs up, then they can be about their activity. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, if
Pike?
I might address that issue. You don't eliminate the exposure to liability entirely. What we're working on here is 2 issues. One, that the participation in a hazardous recreation activity presents a certain amount of immunity to us for the participants. And second, the use of undeveloped property proposes a certain amount of immunity for us. But there is still some exposure with respect to the people in Parma Park, which is turning out to be a major focus of attention for landing, and others
Well, I
that might
assume
be
we
injured.
would put something in Parma Park saying, watch out, somebody may be landing here or something.
Signs are
mean, look
recommended.
around.
Signs are not necessarily
No, I
entire
understand. They
protection.
don't necessarily.
They are recommended.
But I think what we're trying to do here is to accommodate a recreational activity and to limit the city's liability insofar as we can.
There's a certain
to the
amount of limit
extent
to the
that we
liability
can.
doing that, but it isn't eliminated.
No, I understand. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to
Mr.
add that I
Wallen.
think if you follow the recommendations that I saw on the screen regarding the remaining improvements, I think we're not going to lose, we're not going to be able to claim it's unimproved property. It's improved, and if those particular things remain for purposes of preventing erosion and other perhaps significant reasons, it still is improved. And I think the real significant risk to the city is not just that the people that are jumping off there to do their recreational activities are doing so at their own risk, but these waivers and these insurance provisions do not include the city. We're not a party to them, and we have no control over it.
But isn't there a problem in erosion if you remove some of what's there?
I'm not aware of the risks of erosion. I think it's common sense that it probably would cause some, but the point I'm trying to make is that it will be considered improved property. And the erosion of our immunity has already occurred.
Right.
And you have to restore it to natural condition to restore that immunity, and even that is open to question. I know of no case where a public entity went from unimproved to improved and back to unimproved. So I don't know the ultimate conclusion there.
Okay,
Ma-
Mr. Roberts?
Well, that kind of prompts my thinking, as it probably has done everyone else's, is to say then what's the point of requiring removal of 75% of the things if you have 100% of the liability when you're done removing 75% of the things? Why not just leave it as it is?
Because I understand it, the Forest Service is saying if they're going to take it, they want it removed. Is that not correct, Mr. Roebuck?
That's correct.
So that the exchange hinges on, well, I wouldn't say it hinges on that, but if the Forest Service is going to accept it, they want the improvements removed.
Exactly. All those items that were listed up there to be removed, it was what they recommended, as well as the items to remain, they concurred with.
I think
those
what
to
my
remain.
concern is, and I don't mean to be doing all the talking here, but my concern is that the people who are hang gliding and paragliding want to get at it as soon as they can and back to doing it. Okay. The only way that's possible then is to insist that everything be removed, except the few things that you've said, and that we then post it until such time as the Forest Service takes over the responsibility. Is that
Madam Mayor?
correct?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Roberts.
Well,
I guess Mr. Garcia, then Mr. Roberts.
Okay. On the removal of the improvements, I guess that's a condition to immediately get started with the donations. From the standpoint, then, that would motivate a removal to get started with a donation. That could be done, you said, again, by what time? 2 months?
Well,
They can remove it tomorrow.
we're looking at
No, I'm
30
talking about the actual transfer to the Forest Service. That takes 6 months, or I forgot the date. 6 months.
6 months
So-
was the staff report,
So then
yes.
the hang gliders would need to use it then during the time that there might be a liability for a short period of time, from the time the city owns it to the time that it gets transferred. The other thing is that, is there some, I'm sure there must have been some discussion as to what type of insurance would have to be looked at or purchased to include the city and minimize the risk as much as possible. Because I think the only thing we can do to achieve the goals of allowing that to occur is to somehow look at the maximum, I guess, protection for the city. And then I guess it would be a risk of about a period of 6 months it would take to make the transfer.
Mr. Pike?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Garcia, the Hang Gliding Association maintains insurance, and their members maintain insurance. It's really hard to monitor and control this because it's just a wide spot in a remote road. They have offered to name the city as a named insured in their policies, and I think there's even some discussion of expanding theirs to a $5 million policy over the $1 million. The problem from staff point of view is there's no way to assure that a person launching from that site has that insurance, or that we're named, or that they've signed a waiver. But the Hang Gliding Association has indicated their interest and intent to police that and maintain it among their own members, and have offered that to the city.
Mr. Roberts?
Madam Mayor, a couple of things. First off, or if someone who's not in any way affiliated with them jumps off the cliff with wings on their back, it's just not going to, so the insurance wouldn't really matter. But getting back to the point that we seem to be addressing a moment ago about when this fence could come down and when activities could be resumed, if I'm understanding our city attorney correctly, if any of the one of the conditions of the Forest Service receiving the land, the condition is that these improvements be taken out. That may be their conditions for receiving the land in the 6-month process. But if I'm understanding it from where it stands right now with the city, we could take the fence down tomorrow and let the activities resume, because our liability isn't going to be any less than if 75% of the improvements are taken out to satisfy the Forest Service's requirements in a 6-month-long process. Am I making sense, Mr. Wallace?
No.
Well, if I can address that, if I can
Mr.
attempt to
Wallace.
address that question, Mr. Roberts and members of council, the city as present has enforced its code and closed it to hang gliding. If we are to remove it knowing what we know, I think it increases our risk. But it's a matter of whether or not there's going to be an accident.
All right,
I
let me
mean,
refer-
we're knowingly allowing people to violate our code and to use the property for activity which has not been allowed by the landowner.
I understand what you're saying, but what we saw recommended by staff a moment ago, unless I'm misunderstanding this, is a statement was made that as soon as the improvements were removed to satisfy the Forest Service's conditions, the fence could come down. I don't see the liability being reduced if that happens, so why not just let the improvements stay until the time it's turned over to the Forest Service and let the activity resume? The liability is the same either way.
It's not the same as
No.
it is today because there's a fence there and it's not permitted.
Okay.
The fence is coming down the moment they take out their improvements,
Madam-
except for the ones that are remaining.
That's a decision you will make.
Mr. Hart?
Actually, I have a little different take on where Mr. Roberts is going with this. I mean, I think what you're saying, Tom, is that taking out the improvements don't get us in a better place. But it seems to me that if you look at it the other way, that the issue is the timing of when the fence comes down. I mean, it seems to me that you could take the fence down now and require the removal of the improvements, and that would not necessarily change our liability because, as Mr. Wallace has said, the property is improved. And
what
when
I'm
when the improvements are removed, the property will still be improved. So all we're doing basically is saying you can start hang gliding sooner because our liability is the same either way. Doesn't change our need to remove the improvements now, immediately, as fast as possible, because the long-term answer is to transfer the property to the Forest Service, and that's a condition of their doing so. But, you know, it seems to me that the Hang Gliding Association, everybody is equally motivated to get these improvements out as anybody, as we are, and that it just seems like an extra punishment to require them not to be able to hang glide for the week or whatever it's going to take for them to remove those things. I personally don't, I mean, I can see where it's sort of a carrot and a stick thing. You know, you don't get to have fun until you do the work. But on the other hand, I mean, I get a real strong sense here from just about everybody that they want to do the right thing, and maybe we need to take an extra step and make that possible.
Madam Mayor, if I could
Roebuck.
clarify something. We have met with, or myself and Pete Wilson have met with the city attorney staff as well as our risk manager. And our read on this was that there have been significant improvements been made to this property. And that if that fence comes down, the city has significant liability exposure. And that if those improvements are removed that are listed, that you saw listed, and concurred with the Forest Service, that our liability will be reduced significantly. It will not be eliminated, it will still exist, but it will be something that is manageable. So that's why we are requiring that those improvements be removed prior to taking down the fence and prior to the resumption of hang gliding and paragliding activities.
Mr. Roebuck, how long would it take to remove the improvements if everybody's motivated to remove them?
I'm looking forward to an offer as far as that goes. I haven't talked with Tom Truax or members of the Hang Gliding Paragliding Association about time. They seem to be very motivated. I would imagine within 30 days, if not less time. I think this is an enforcement action we're talking about, and it still is against Tom Truax. And so if the council goes forward with the recommendations as stated in the council report, I'd be looking at a minimum of 30 days for that occur, and if it occurred in a week or 2 weeks, as soon as those improvements are removed, then that fence can come down. So,
Okay, now, just a minute. Mrs. Langer, then Mrs. Beaver, and then Mr. Roberts again.
Well, a simple question first. In regard to the other lands that you're talking about transferring to the Forest Service, that in a way has nothing to do with this whole issue, but it's something that's been triggered by this discussion. Is that correct?
yes,
At
that's
this point?
correct.
Okay. On the issue of when the improvements get taken out, I think there's another point here, and that is that there's been work conducted without permits, there's been a stop work notice, and in other circumstances, the city doesn't close its eye and say, go ahead, we'll let you have fun while you keep your illegal improvements in place and let you take them out sometime later. An enforcement action is an enforcement action. And I think if we're to have other people respect our process in regard to enforcement actions on housing and illegal units and shoddy construction, the same process should be in place here.
Mrs. Beaver?
Mrs. Langer makes a good point. Mr. Roebuck or Mr. Wallace or What if you took the fence down and posted the area and say this is city property, you may not hang glide or hang glide at your own risk?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the difficulty is enforcement. We don't have the staff to patrol this area. It'd be virtually, impossible for us to patrol and control hang gliding and paragliding activities. That's why we feel that the improvements must be removed, prior to the fence coming down and prior to the resumption of hang gliding and paragliding. We just cannot patrol it.
Okay, Mr. Roberts?
I don't know if this is for Mr. Landreth or who this is for, but what is the difference from a liability and risk standpoint from this improved area with benches and grass and trash cans and any park in the city in terms of liability?
Mr. Roberts, the answer is that this is ultra-hazardous activity, and there's a specific government code section that deals with immunity to government entities who permit ultra-hazardous activities to occur on unimproved public property. So the difference becomes, if the public property becomes improved, the immunity is significantly eroded. I believe that's the way Bob Roebuck put it, and I think that's a good way to put it.
Then my next question would be, if, as you stated earlier, the property has now been improved and cannot be unimproved with the removal of 75% of the activities, how does the risk somehow become more manageable when the fence comes down, 75% of the improvements get taken out, but it's still improved property in which a hazardous activity is taking place? How does the risk become lessened? It can't become lessened by doing that, because you can't return it to its natural state.
You could return it to its natural state, but it would require more than what has been spoken about.
Mr. Landreth?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Roberts, your question to what occurs after the identified improvements have been removed with respects to the order, the enforcement order, and the remaining retaining wall and steps. We've heard already that to remove the improvements will allow us, that is, as a public entity, to stand behind the immunity. However, the city attorney feels, rightly so, that there may be some problem with being able to enact that immunity in its entirety, because we are treading in unknown territory. He points out that he's not familiar with the case, nor am I, where a public entity has had improvements, removed the improvements, and continued to stand behind the immunity for recreational activities, hazardous recreational activities. What we do gain, however, by removing the improvements that have been identified is we're no longer authorizing or permitting that setting to be used as a park. You have gone up there, I believe, and you know that all you need to do is venture out about 50 yards or so and you got sheer cliffs. I look at this setting now, removing the improvements, as a protection against the city, because now we have taken away, if you will, the stature of that area as being considered a park. When you look at the cliffs or the drop-off up there at the Skyport, it's no different than we have at Shoreline Park. All you need to do is superimpose Shoreline Park up there, and you look at the improvements that we had to take in order to protect the public, i.e. a fence that surrounds the perimeter of the bluffs there at Shoreline Park. The purpose of keeping the retaining walls in, as been indicated, is for erosion. Now, whether or not that would be used by a third party as an improvement, thereby eliminating the immunity that we have, is a question that I cannot answer because there's no case law that we could lean to answer that question. But I believe that from a management standpoint, a risk management standpoint, that it becomes more manageable to us to allow those retaining walls to stay and deal with the risk with respects to what could occur while they're there. But by taking them out, we could potentially create a cascading effect and exposure from the standpoint that if it erodes, if the hillside erodes, the road can also erode. thereby causing a driving hazard with people going up there during the course of transferring or going across the hillside there.
Okay, I'm going to use the prerogative of the presiding officer and declare a 10-minute recess, and then we'll have public comment.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Since you want it brief, I'm going to take this opportunity to read a letter from another flyer in Aspen who recently brought a couple of other flyers out to enjoy Santa Barbara after myself and others raved at how wonderful it was here. It says, "Dear Santa Barbara City Council, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Davis. I hold an advanced paragliding instructor rating with the United States Hang Gliding Association. I also hold a tandem rating to teach paragliding in my hometown of Aspen, Colorado. Aspen, a popular resort, has two busy seasons, summer and winter. During the off-seasons, I travel to other flying sites to enhance my skills and knowledge. Last October, I traveled to Santa Barbara to fly. I had a wonderful experience flying with the local pilots and sharing many of the other local attractions in Santa Barbara. It is with great disappointment that my spring trip was met with a closed fence to flying in your city. I did manage to fly a site with a local pilot, but this required a drive of 1.5 hours to the north. Other than flying outside the city, my lodging and most of my dining were also outside your city. This is a reversal from my spring trip. To my further disappointment, I was not traveling alone. I had made rave reviews about the Santa Barbara experience and was traveling with 2 companions. As a person directly involved with the tourist industry in another resort town, Aspen, I think your actions will kill a section of your visiting guests. I do not intend on making a return trip to Santa Barbara, nor recommend one to others without a change in your policy toward flying. Kelly Davis, Aspen, Colorado."
Thank you. Rolf Scholin, I'm sorry.
It's Shoyan.
Okay, Shoya. And then Pam Truax, and then Daniel Jager.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short, and all I want to say is that I've been a resident there for 5 years, and I'm a paraglider pilot, and I've been in all of the parks in Santa Barbara, and the Rainbow Skyport is definitely the most beautiful one, I think. It's no other park that has such a beautiful view and where you can go up and enjoy the openness. So thank you.
Pam Truax, followed by Daniel Jager, followed by Laura Nolan.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'll just take a minute. My name is Pam Truax, and I'm a paraglider pilot. I took up paragliding 1.5 years ago after being a faithful spectator for more than 2 years. It's an incredible sport and nothing I could ever imagine myself doing at age 40. Every day, every week, after about 50 hours of stress-filled work, the excitement kicks in just thinking about flying all weekend. And the most beautiful launch site in Santa Barbara, and I suspect just about anywhere in the U.S., is Rainbow Skyport on Gibraltar Road. It's extremely disturbing to think about the 6-foot fence that now blocks the flying site and also prevents anyone in the community from relaxing on the grass and taking in the beauty of where we all live. I know intimately the tremendous labor of pure love that was put into the creation of Rainbow Skyport. It is an asset to the community, and it would be heartbreaking to see it permanently blocked or even worse, torn down. I ask that you return access to the flying sites in Rainbow Skyport as they exist today. How can there be any value in preventing flying or tearing out Rainbow Skyport? Thank you.
Thank you, David Jager, Laura Nolan, and then Cherry Major. Daniel Yeager. Laura Nolan. Sherry Major. Followed by David Connolly.
Good evening. My name is Siobhan Major, Chevy in parentheses. I am not a paraglider or a hang glider. I take great pride in riding my bike up to Rainbow Skyport and flying down Gibraltar on my bike with nobody for liability. I strongly support the park. I've been here for 20 years in Santa Barbara. I saw the park grow. I have a park bench up there. I have submitted a letter to you through a letter to the editor, through your clerk. And I just want to emphasize that we keep using the word improvements. It is an improvement to Santa Barbara, and I wish we could take pride in the improvement. And I know it was made without work permits, but there's worse laws to break than building a park.
Okay.
If you want, slap a fine on Tom, tell him 200 hours of community service, and I'm sure he'd be happy to do it. He's already done it. I just want to say again that I really support the park, and it isn't just for paragliders and hang gliders. I bring people up there all the time, and it's just a gorgeous spot. I think that's it.
Okay,
That's all I have to say.
David
Thank you.
Connolly, and then Warren Fenzi, and then Casey Rogers.
Hi, I'm David Conley. Like all the other pilots who use the Gibraltar Road launch sites, I'd like to have the fence come down as soon as possible. And as someone who also enjoys the improvements made by Mr. Truax, I'd like to express my hope that they could somehow remain substantially intact. Thank you.
Thank you. Warren Fenzi, Casey Rogers. Warren Fenzi, Casey Rogers, David Hofstadter.
Hello, my name's Casey Rogers. I've lived in Santa Barbara for about 12 years. I'm an avid mountain bicyclist and wannabe bird. I also have been to almost every park in Santa Barbara, and the Skyport is by far the most beautiful park I've ever seen in my life. And it just breaks my heart to think that we're considering tearing this place down. It's beyond belief in my head that we could actually consider that. I mean, the legal issues and liability are one thing, but a jewel that has been given to the city by the hard work of Tom Truax and the people that have tried to build this park is just, it would be a crime to take this park away from the community. Thank you.
David Hofstadter, and then Stephen Bohm.
Council member, I've lived in Santa Barbara about 20 years. I don't fly very actively anymore. I flew for about 5 years, started a family a couple of years ago, and have pursued a different kind of bliss lately. But while I was hang gliding, I certainly enjoyed the totally unimproved flying site and the unimproved use of Parma Park. I'm now a homeowner in the Parma Park area. My experience has been that hang gliding is definitely an important recreational asset in Santa Barbara. I have people over to my home who aren't even aware that I was once a hang glider pilot, and their response to seeing the pilots flying in the area in the skies above the El Cielito Highlands is very positive, almost unanimously. In fact, it is, in my experience, unanimous. I see it definitely as an asset in our community. I absolutely support the recommendations of staff. It would be great if somehow in your insights you could accelerate the pulling down of the fence, but in lieu of that, accept the moderate risk and enable flying in Santa Barbara again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephen Bohm, and then Eve Bajolas. I'm not sure on from Solvang.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening. I've lived in Santa Barbara all my life. I enjoy it tremendously. We have a wonderful location here. I just wanted to say that I'm in support of the removal of the fence and that the property be returned to its highest and most beneficial use, and that currently is in the form of a park as it stands. You're weighing two things. One is risk, and the other is the most beneficial use for our community. My children have enjoyed rolling down the green grass hills of the park, and would certainly continue to enjoy that in the future. I also know that the Forest Service does do quite a large amount of improvement on their own sites, and I would like to have it considered to have that explored further as to whether the improvements could continue. Again, I support the park as a site.
Thank you. Eve.
Hi, my name is Yves Bajula. I've been living
I
here.
apologize.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Good evening.
I didn't do very well, did I? Okay.
And I've been living in the Santa Barbara County since 1980. I've been flying professionally since '83. I fly everything from paraglider to business jet. I've flown a lot in Europe, that's where I'm from, and traveling to all those countries, I still haven't seen a place as reliable as the Gibraltar launch site year-round. You can fly so many days and more than any other place I've ever seen. As for high danger sport, I don't see any difference between flying a paraglider or a business jet. And I recommend the fence be taken down and the issue of the park and flying separated.
Thank you. Timothy Newberger, followed by Melissa Jacobson, followed by Dane Jacobson. And then Greg Marks.
I'm Tim Newberger. I've lived in Santa Barbara for 6 years. I fly only a mountain bike, but I enjoy Gibraltar Road tremendously, riding up there very frequently. I support whatever it will take to resume flying for both the paragliders and the hang gliders, and of course removal of the fence as soon as possible.
Thank you. Melissa Jacobson, and then Dane Jacobson, then Greg Marks, and Daryl Fortney.
Hi, yes, I'm Melissa Jacobson, and I would just like to stress that I am I love the park. I was proposed to up there last March, and now we are married, and so it's a little bit sentimental to me, and I would like to have it, to go up to every year on our anniversary to, have a toast, and it's just a shame to me to see it go away, or even the thoughts of it going away really devastate me, because it is so incredibly beautiful, and it's such a spiritual experience just being up there and seeing Santa Barbara and that view and everything else. So please just don't tear it down.
The view will still be there, though.
Yes, but you won't be able to sit in the nice grass and everything like that.
You sit on the grass, right. Dane Jacobson and Greg Marks, and then Daryl Fortney.
Madam Mayor, City Council, thank you for letting me speak here. Yeah, that was my wife, and I did propose to her. I spoke to you before that she was my fiance, and we've gotten married since. Unfortunately, Pam Truax, who spoke earlier, was going to have her wedding up at the park, and she planned it for a year, and unfortunately, with the fence being there, she couldn't do that. But I support the park and the grass, and I'm a pilot here for 9 years, and started out as a hang glider pilot. Now I fly both paraglider and hang gliders, and I love the park, and keeping it the way it is now is essential, especially with the grass, and you want to consider the grass an erosion control, because if the grass dies and the foot traffic stays, that whole slope will slide, guaranteed. It is steep enough to slide. And so as it is now with all the people and traffic, the grass is definitely an erosion control. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Marks, followed by Daryl Fortney. Greg Marks, Daryl Fortney, and then Indra Smith and Neil Perro.
Hi. I guess a month ago I took my first pass by the Gibraltar launch site, and I just thought it was a turnoff on the road, and then I saw the benches and the grass, and I thought, this is incredible. And when I saw some hang gliders leave from there, I decided that's what I was going to do. I guess I have to admit I'm addicted to ultra high risk activities, but I also admit that me and everyone else in this room that partakes in the sports has very, very strong feelings about the safety of the sport. As an example, my first day of lessons, hang gliding, well, we didn't really even start talking until I had signed up for the United States Hang Gliding Association and their insurance policies and everything else. So it's just an indication that you can't patrol that, like you're saying. You have no way of guaranteeing that everyone that jumps off of that site has insurance. But just from what I've experienced, it's pretty much a guarantee. I mean, they won't even talk to you unless you have it. So the other thing that I'd like to say is that the park itself, I think, is beautiful, and I'd never like to see it perish.
Okay, Indra Smith, followed by Neil Perro, followed by Mark Pratt.
Hello, my name is Indra Smith, and I was born and raised here in Santa Barbara. And I am not a paraglider or a hang glider, but I just wanted to say that I love the park, and I hope you let it stay the way it is. It's beautiful. Thanks.
Neil Perro, Mark Pratt, and then Toby Dury.
Hi, my name's Neil Perro. I'm from Los Angeles. I come up and use the park almost every weekend. Sometimes to paraglide, but more importantly, as a place to just behold the city. I think it's stunning. I think the fence is kind of an insult to the land visually. I would like it taken down. Also, it would be good if the people who negotiate and speak for the park could do the same with the Forest Service later on, if that should happen in 6 months or so, that they could talk about what could stay and what could go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark Pratt, followed by Toby Dury, followed by James Nichols from Carpinteria.
Hello, my name is Mark Pratt. I live in Fillmore, which I know is a distance away. I served the community there as a dentist for about the last 12 years. I'm a paraglider pilot. I fly there probably 90% of the time and fly here periodically. I enjoy flying here. Santa Barbara is great because all the cultural activities. My wife loves to come here. My child has always been in zoo camp and now a counselor in training. And this is where we do our recreational activities. And closing down the launch site makes it very difficult as a family for me to be able to participate in the sport as a family. And returning it to its natural state, I think would be very difficult for my family to be able to be a part of this great sport because of the ruggedness of the countryside out there. Another thing is I fly Fillmore most of the time on the mountains behind Fillmore, and I'm always getting requests from the city to be able to fly and to get other flyers to be able to fly in, like the Orange Festival that we just had and other festivals in the future. And I've been approached by Roger Campbell and other people of the city council to be able to try to, because they want to be able to develop that, because they think that that's in congruence or in, they want to develop the city for recreational purposes and they think that that's one way that they can do it, and they're thinking about basically helping developing launch and landing sites and making improvements with that. So I'd like to be able to see, I don't understand when I come here why we're not looking at more as solutions and not just building walls here. Thank you very much.
Toby Dury, James Nichols from Carpinteria, followed by Carl Meinhardt.
Good evening. My name is James Knuckles, and I'm not a pilot, but I would like to express my support for the park, and I'd like to urge the council to do whatever it can to preserve the park in as intact a state as possible, and to remove the fence as soon as you can so that the pilots can continue to use the Gibraltar launch site. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Meinhardt, Brian Troutwine, and Chris Pratt.
Hi, my name's Carl Meinhardt, and I recently moved to Santa Barbara about 6 months ago from the Midwest. And let me tell you, Santa Barbara is an absolutely outstanding place to live. And using the Gibraltar Roadside Park is a great place to spend a Sunday afternoon. And I also hang glide, and I thoroughly enjoy that. And I picked that up since coming here. And to do away with either one of those things is unfortunate. And I really think that hang gliding should live long and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Troutwine, Chris Pratt, Sandra Squires. She'll be followed by Robert Poland,
Hello, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Sandra Squires, and I am not a paraglider pilot or a hang glider pilot, although I would like to at some point. And I would just like to offer my support to the association in general for making the improvements legal, putting everything up to code. I'm very much in favor of doing things principled and trying to make that rectifiable so that everyone can enjoy the park. It is beautiful, and I would encourage any of you that want to take a flight, I'm sure that could be arranged. And you might want to even consider hiring Tom to do some city landscaping and maybe doing some conservator work. Because he's done a beautiful job up there. Lend him a truck so he doesn't have to use his own. And it is a beautiful, beautiful area up there, and certainly want to preserve that in the most principled manner possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Poland, be followed by Patricia Ranch and then Jeff Ranch.
Madam Mayor and council people, I would like to say that as a new pilot, I'm very looking forward to advancing to the Gibraltar Road launch site, and that will be a big step in my flight education, and I urge you to give the park and the flight activities a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Ranch.
Madam Mayor, distinguished council, I'm Patricia Ranch. I'm not a pilot of any kind. I live in Ventura. We bring visitors from other states and even New Zealand and Costa Rica to show off Santa Barbara all the time, every time they come to visit. And our discovery of the park has been one of the great spots, highlights of their trip out here. It really does show off the possibilities of what can be done in those upper areas and what can be seen. And I hope that as a future mother of twins, I'm able to bring my twins up there and enjoy the park as it stands today. Thank you.
Jeff Ranch.
Madam Mayor, council members, my wife articulated very well what I feel also, and I think Tom Truex did also. The key part is getting hang gliding going in Santa Barbara again. I haven't flown for nearly 3 years now, but I did enjoy the sport till its fullest. A lot of these people in here are my friends, and I saw what has been going over as far as the legal nature and everything, but the Sky Park is important. The grass is important. The benches are important. It's a beautiful place, and everything that you can do to keep that in place would be important.
Thank you. Luke, I think it is Kenna, and he is the last speaker on the item 35A.
Mayor and council members, I would like to express my love of flying, which was presented to you in a video, which I hope you were able to all observe. I would just simply like to say that I would like to support the park for safety reasons for paragliders. The paraglider park of Skyport is a fantastic launch area, and to eliminate that as a launch area for paraglider pilots substantially increases the risk. Due to Tom's input, he has created an area that helps beginner paraglider pilots and advanced paraglider pilots to launch in a very safe environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John de Bruin, followed by Nadine de Bruin, followed by Jeff Gritch, I'm not sure. Cliff Drive, Santa Barbara.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of speaking for a few minutes. I fly both hang gliders and paragliders and would urge City Council to consider taking the fence down as quickly as possible, if not tomorrow. I'm anxious to fly again from this wonderful place. Other cities have found ways, and I certainly commend the staff for the wonderful work that they've done, but other cities have found ways of limiting their liability and have sponsored improvements. And I don't believe that we should have to wait until the improvements come down to fly again. I think there must be a path to resolve that and let flying continue. I really need to keep my sanity, and I would appreciate it if you would help me.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Nadine de Bruin. And Jeff Gritch, I'm not sure about this one, but Cliff Drive, 2532 Cliff Drive. Okay, go ahead. And then Scott Angel. Go ahead.
Good evening. As the wife of John de Bruin, if he doesn't fly, he gets
I was sure
difficult
that's
to
what
live
you were
with.
going to say.
I want to make a couple observations. I do not fly. I have taken 2 tandem flights in the last 3 years. My 2 observations are we've traveled to Lakeview, Oregon, and Chelan, Washington, and other places where the communities encourage flying and increase their tourist revenues through the encouragement of flying. And I want to say that the hang gliders and paragliders are a backdrop to our community. I've been up at the Gibraltar turnout when John has been setting up. People drive by and they always ask questions. They're always very positive and very interested in what is happening. The second thing that I would like to address is when John wanted to start flying 20 years ago. And as we had small children, I asked him to postpone that. And he did. He postponed it till the kids got to both be 18. And then he said, you know, I still want to do that. And I support him in the sport. And I want to address this idea of these weirdos, which I find, that was what I thought this high risk factor, which I strongly disagree with. I find that they are very responsible individuals who check their equipment very carefully, check the weather, check themselves, something that I would have a hard time to do. They get up to launch, and if something doesn't feel right, they're willing to back off. And I strongly think that these are very thoughtful, introspective, self-reliant people that take responsibility for their own sport.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, and I apologize, and then Scott Angel and Robert Ramey.
You had it right. Thank you. My name is Jeff Gritch. Been flying for hang gliders and paragliders for a long time here. Hang gliders over 10 years. I support the park. I helped Tom make it. I think that hang gliding is a very safe sport. I would hate to see the question of liability ruin a park like that. It's a beautiful place, but I am also willing to do whatever the city council recommends to get the fence down. That's the most important thing here, is that the fence can be removed as quickly as possible so I can resume flying. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Angel and Robert Ramey and Ted Ross.
Hello, my name is Robert Angel, Robert Scott Angel. My dad, Roland Angel, I took him flying for the first time 7 years ago for Father's Day, and we've been doing it, and this is the Eliminator is what they call it. At the Gibraltar launch is a very safe place to fly. My dad's turned 50 this year, and you know he's going to fly many more years, and it's a very safe place to fly from and convenient, and I'd like to fly there tomorrow after work, so please take the fence down. Thank you.
Okay. Robert Rowland, Ted Ross, and then Roland Angel.
My name is Robert Ramey. I'm secretary of the Santa Barbara Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association, and I just have one question for the city attorney. Besides hang gliding and paragliding, the following activities occur on city property on a regular basis: surfing, windsurfing, ocean swimming, rollerblading, bicycling, horseback riding, hiking, and rock climbing. And I can't see, and I would like to know if there's any reason why hang gliding and paragliding should be treated any different than these activities. And if not, do you expect to curtail these other activities in the future as well?
Okay, thank you, Ted Ross, and then Roland Angel, and then Robert Anderson, and Ann Thomas.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm Ted Ross, and I've lived in this area since 1961. And I did learn to hang glide when I was 49 years old, and I flew for a few years. I don't fly anymore, although I still have my advanced rating. I wanted to point out to you that the development of hang gliding in this area has probably been the most remarkable thing I've observed in living in Santa Barbara. It didn't exist before I came here. It happened and became popular, and it is where it is today. Now, the infrastructure supporting the hang gliding activity in this area is very fragile. This area is unique in that it's possible to hang glide here. This area is one of 5 Mediterranean type climate areas in the world, and it extends for a very narrow region of Southern California in this area. I would respectfully request that you consider the challenge of how to protect the hang gliding environment that we have, and part of this environment, of course, is the little park that was constructed and the various landing areas that we've used. It's awfully easy to lose those sites, and we are very concerned about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Roland Angel, Robert Anderson, and Ann Thomas.